The first time she heard his language, it was not spoken to her. It was shouted across the camp, sharp and impatient, words carried by cold air and barbed wire. She did not understand the sentences, but she understood the tone: authority, control, finality. She kept her eyes lowered, her hands wrapped tightly around her coat, as soldiers moved her forward with dozens of others who had survived the bombing but not the suspicion that followed it. Her name was Anna Weiss. At least, that was the name she still whispered to herself every night, afraid that if she stopped, it would disappear. The Allied forces had taken her after the raid on the outskirts of Leipzig. Someone said she matched the description of a courier. Someone else said it was safer to hold her than to release her. That was all it took. No trial, no explanation. Just a number stitched onto her sleeve and a future reduced to waiting. Waiting to be questioned, waiting to be transferred, waiting to be forgotten. The camp was quieter than she expected. No screams, no chaos, only the constant sound of wind brushing against wooden barracks and the distant coughs of prisoners who had learned not to complain. Anna had lost her home, her parents, and the small life she once believed would slowly grow into something meaningful. Now she sat on a wooden bench, surrounded by strangers who spoke different languages but shared the same hollow expression. Fear here was not loud. It was patient. It waited with you. Days passed without names, only orders. Then, one morning, her number was called, and for the first time since her arrest, someone looked at her as if she were more than a mistake. His name was Daniel Carter. He was young, younger than she expected someone in uniform to be. His face still carried traces of softness that war had not yet erased. He was a translator. Brought in because Anna spoke fractured English. She had learned from books and radio. Broadcasts long before the war had turned the world into lines and borders. Daniel was told to ask questions, to find inconsistencies, to confirm whether she was what they feared she might be. Instead, he asked her name. She hesitated before answering, her voice almost lost as she said it. Anna Weiss. He repeated it slowly, carefully, as if testing whether it belonged in his mouth. He wrote it down, then looked back at her, not with suspicion, but with something else: curiosity, maybe, or recognition. He asked where she lived, what she did before the war. She answered honestly, because lying required energy she no longer had. She told him about her father's watch repair shop, about her mother's habit of humming while cooking, about how she once wanted to study literature. Daniel listened, not like a soldier completing a task, but like a man being trusted with something fragile. After that day, Daniel became the one sent whenever Anna was questioned or transferred between holding areas. Officially, it was because of her English. Unofficially, neither of them asked why it kept happening. Their conversations were brief, always under watch, but something subtle began to grow in those stolen minutes. He would correct her pronunciation gently. She would ask him about his home, careful not to ask about the war. He told her about a small town in Ohio, about cornfields and summers that smelled like rain. She tried to imagine it, a place untouched by ruins. Sometimes, when the guards were distracted, he would slip her an extra piece of bread. Sometimes, she would save part of it, not because she didn't need it, but because it felt wrong to accept kindness without remembering it. One evening, after a long interrogation that left her exhausted and shaking, Daniel escorted her back to the barracks. As they walked, she asked him a question she had been holding inside for days. "Do you think they will let me go?" He did not answer immediately. That pause told her more than any lie could have. Finally, he said, "I don't know." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her since the war began. That night, Anna lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that hope was becoming more painful than fear. The next morning, she asked Daniel to remember something for her. He looked confused as she spoke quietly, her words barely moving her lips. "If I don't leave this place, please remember my name." He frowned, uncomfortable. "You'll leave," he said. She shook her head. "If I don't," she repeated, "I don't want to be only a number." Daniel tried to dismiss it, but the request stayed with him. Over the following weeks, rumors spread through the camp. Transfers, executions, releases. No one knew who would be next. Anna grew thinner, quieter. Her strength faded, but her presence did not. She continued speaking to Daniel whenever she could, telling him stories from her childhood, small details that seemed meaningless but were everything to her. The smell of her mother's bread, the sound of church bells on winter mornings, the name of the stray cat that used to sleep behind the shop. Daniel began writing these things down in a small notebook he kept hidden inside his jacket. He told himself it was for translation practice. Deep down, he knew it was something else. It was proof. It was memory. One afternoon, the camp was thrown into chaos. Orders came fast. Prisoners were moved. Files were burned. Anna was separated from the others and placed in a temporary holding area near the edge of the camp. Daniel was told she was being processed. He knew what that word could mean. He tried to access her file, but it was gone. He argued with a superior and was warned to remember his place. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her voice asking him to remember her name. The next morning, he found her sitting alone on a bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked calmer than he had ever seen her. When she saw him, she smiled, and it broke something inside him. "They told me I'll be moved tomorrow," she said. "Where?" he asked. She shrugged. "Does it matter?" They stood in silence, surrounded by guards who paid them no attention. Finally, she spoke again. "Do you remember?" He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "I remember." The next day, Anna Weiss was gone. No announcement. No record, just absence. Daniel asked questions and received none. He returned to his duties, translating orders that blurred together, his notebook heavier in his pocket than any weapon. When the war ended, he went home, carrying memories that did not belong to victory. He tried to return to normal life, but Anna followed him everywhere. In quiet moments, he would open the notebook and read her name, her stories, her proof of existence. Years passed. He studied history, then law. He worked with organizations dedicated to documenting civilian losses during the war. Every form he filled, every testimony he recorded, felt like a continuation of a promise. Eventually, Daniel traveled back to Europe. He visited archives, camps, and memorial sites. Most names were missing. Records incomplete, but he refused to accept that as the end. In a small town near Leipzig, he found a local memorial dedicated to civilians who died during the war. It had space for additions. He spoke with officials, showed them his notes, told them about a woman who had been taken without reason and erased without record. They hesitated, asked for proof. He opened his notebook and read aloud. Not statistics, not accusations, just a life. Anna Weiss, daughter, dreamer, survivor, prisoner. The silence that followed was heavy, but different from the silence of the camp. This one carried weight. Weeks later, the name was added, small, simple, permanent. Daniel stood in front of the stone as the letters were carved. He traced them with his fingers, feeling the grooves fill with rain. He whispered the promise again, even though it had already been kept. Somewhere between memory and history, Anna Weiss existed again. Not as a number, not as an enemy, but as a name remembered by someone who had once been ordered to forget. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by names that war had tried to erase, Daniel understood that love did not always survive in the way stories wanted it to. Sometimes it survived only as memory. Sometimes that was enough.